Hey folks, Jim Hardiman from Hardiman Images, and this quick tip is on finding a better starting point for processing raw images using Lightroom, in this case Lightroom 5. Often when I talk to folks, they tell me that they're very disappointed with how their raw images look when they import them into Lightroom. They've seen an image on the back of their camera which they're pleased with, but when they bring it into Lightroom, it looks flat and very low contrast. The reason for that is the image that you're seeing on the back of your camera is actually a JPEG after saturation, color, and contrast adjustments have been made. When you import your image into Lightroom, that JPEG thumbnail comes in with it. So that's the first thing you see, but instantly after clicking the image in Lightroom, it switches over to the raw image with an Adobe standard profile applied, which can be low contrast and very flat. And this often dissuades people from shooting in RAW because they're not happy with how they look when they bring it into Lightroom, and it's a lot of work to get that image to a point where you like it. So I'm here to tell you that there's a simple way of correcting that through Adobe Profiles. And for me, getting to a better starting point includes sorting that out and removing some lens distortion, and finally removing pink and blue lines you'll see from time to time. It's called Chromatic Aberration. So we'll switch over to Lightroom and I'll show you how to do that. The first image was shot near Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, Canada, in a small village called Stonehurst. Very lovely little spot. And this image, as you can see, is a Nikon electronic file image, so that means it's a Nikon RAW. I'm in the library module. I'll switch over to Develop. The last panel here is Camera Calibration, and the second item is called Profile. And you'll see that the Adobe standard profile has been applied, which is the profile that's applied to every image that you import, regardless of camera. Doesn't matter whether it's a Canon, Nikon, or etc. You're going to end up with that. When I click on that, you'll see there's a number of selections. These selections are specific to the camera brand and specific to the camera itself, and are what I would find inside my camera for selecting shooting profiles if I was going to save in JPEG. So there's a whole bunch of them there. If I select this other image, which is an image shot with a Canon camera, shot by a buddy of mine, Derek Coombs, has given me permission to use it. You'll see that this is a CR2 file, so that's the Canon RAW format. Again, you'll see the Adobe standard has been applied to it, so it makes it a very flat image. Let's go back to, no, before I do that, I'll show you that the choices here are different than you saw for Nikon. And that's because they're specific to this camera and camera brand. So this is what Derek would see in his camera if he was going to save his image as a JPEG. So back over to the Nikon image. Now I'll show you how to fix that. If you take a look at Adobe Standard in the profile, if I click on that and I go down to Landscape, watch the image. Immediately it changes. That's because I've had saturation, color, and contrast adjustments made to this image. It makes a huge difference in how this image looks. If I select Camera Vivid, you'll see another change. So depending on the image that I'm using, this is most often the two that I select, Camera Landscape and Camera Vivid. If I'm shooting portraits, I make sure I select Camera Portrait because the other two will make the skin tones quite red and you won't like that. So if you're shooting in a portrait, make sure you select Camera Portrait. Okay, it's a lot flatter. So I'll go back to Camera Landscape, and now we'll look at the other two things that I do. The second one is enabling this profile correction for lens distortion. When you shoot with a zoom lens, you'll end up with some distortion. Even with some primes you will. When I click this box, you'll see that the image squared off. It got rid of the keystoning in the image and some of the other lens distortions. It makes it a much more pleasing image. The last thing I do is if I zoom in on this image, you will see a blue fringe along this building and some pink along these wires here. It's harder to see the pink, but the blue is very obvious. This is caused by lens dispersion, and the different colors of light all have different wavelengths, and they tend to focus in different spots. Depending on the focal length of the lens and the lighting conditions, you may end up with these fringes. You don't always end up with them because it depends on the focal length you've selected, the lens you're using, and the lighting conditions. To get rid of them, it's a simple matter of selecting Remove Chromatic Aberration. I click that, it's gone. What that gives you is a much cleaner edge, and a much sharper looking image. So, very, very simple. Camera calibration, select a profile. For me, it's often camera landscape. Into lens corrections, enable a profile correction for lens distortion, and finally remove the chromatic aberration. One last thing. If you're shooting a JPEG image, this is JPEG, shot in Petawawa, Ontario, Canada, you'll notice that the profile says embedded. It's because it is. If you shoot in JPEG or save in JPEG and save in TIFF, you will not have these profiles. You will have the word embedded. So this only works for RAW. So to recap, we'll select the raw image. We'll take Derek's image this time. Profile, camera landscape in this case. You see the change in the image. Enable profile correction for lens corrections, and remove the chromatic aberration if there is any. That's your 3 steps. This has been Jim Hardiman from Hardiman Images, showing you a better starting point for processing raw images. Check out the website, hardimanimages.com. There's a lot more there. And if you got any comments in this video, you can leave them there, or you can leave them below this video. Bye for now.